In today's episode, I'm speaking with Kelly Pearson of Ladygarden Wines. Welcome to the Winederlust podcast. My name's Jeanene and I run a wine events business in Canberra. But my real passion is travel and my bucket list is to travel to every wine region in the world. In this series, I'll be exploring some regional Aussie wine destinations. I'll give you some tips whether you're planning a romantic getaway, a girls' weekend, or you're dragging the kids along. So pour yourself a glass and let's get exploring. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land that I met Kelly on, the Winederlust country, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. In this episode, we are kicking off Season 8 with a fabulous chat with the very impressive winemaker Kelly Pearson. Kelly has worked making wines in both China and India, which I think are such unique experiences. I knew there was wine in China, but I actually didn't know there was wine in India, so I found this really fascinating. Kelly is now back in Australia in her hometown of Geelong with her label Ladygarden Wines. Kelly's super passionate about leveraging her experiences to get more women into the wine industry. You can check her out on socials as she has a lot of plans in the pipeline. Please welcome Kelly Pearson and enjoy the chat. Welcome, Kelly, to the Winederlust podcast. So Kelly Pearson of Ladygarden Wines, you're based in Geelong. Yep. You have such an interesting story and I was really excited to share that with the listeners. I love speaking to women in wine and you have travelled and been to some excellent places that I don't know much about at all in regards to wine, and I'm super interested to hear more. First of all, tell us about Ladygarden Wines. You do a lot of collaborations. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Ladygarden Wines was born out of an original partnership, which then I've taken on and expanded into something that I'd always believed in, which was celebrating women in wine. And as I've gotten older, I've realised I want to give back. And I love working with people. When you run your own business, you're often on your own. And I wanted to support up-and-coming people, women in the industry. I want to be able to give back through scholarships, etc. So I've developed this whole concept around, whilst I make small batches of wine from here in Geelong, and sometimes I've got fruit from other places, each year I aim to partner with 3 or 4 different partners in wine, I call them, and I buy the grapes, I pay for the winemaking. Their name goes on the label under the Ladygarden brand, and then we market it and sell it.
Like, how do you apply? Like, are these women winemakers already working for other people, or?
Essentially, it's been through contacts that I've had or people that I've just become social media friends with and said, hey, would you like to be part of this project, etc. So next year is when I'm going to be ramping it up again. I've now just taken on a distributor who's been wanting to work with me for about 4 years. So I've finally done that because I realised apparently you can't do everything. Yeah. We try.
We try.
We can't do
do
everything.
try.
Yeah.
And I love how you said, like, even experienced winemakers, because I think probably when you collaborate, you do things differently. You learn off each other and things like that. And maybe the wines are different to what they've produced in the past.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, to be honest, one of my first partners in wine was Erin Pooley from Little Francis. And what I did was go up to Beechworth. She said, I've got some access to some Arnaise. And we did what I call my palate calibration tasting, where we tasted samples together. So you can be in front of someone when they're talking about a wine rather than going, you can talk generic terms about acidity, etc. But when you're there and you're both tasting the same wine, then you're on the same page. So we did that. And she had said, well, what do you want to do? And I said, well, essentially, you have your own business and you're a fantastic winemaker. Go hard. No, do what you think is best for that fruit and for a wine that you're going to be, really happy making and so forth. And I said, the only thing I ask is that I see it perhaps once or twice during the process just to have a look and a chat about. So I'm not here to change it. It's to, depending on who I partner with. Obviously with Kelly, she needed a bit of guidance and I'd written a whole winemaking plan and she's incredibly meticulous and was ringing me and we had great chats and everything. Erin was like, no, just do your thing. And I saw it just before it was bottled, and it's an outstanding wine. And I bumped into her in Sydney on International Women's Day. We did a tasting up there with, I think it was 18 women winemakers from around Australia. And she said that she was really proud of that wine, and she should be. It's an absolute cracker.
Oh, fantastic.
Yeah. So essentially I say, if their experience have their own business, and it's picking a variety that they'd like to work with, then true to that region and true to their style of winemaking. So I'm not really there to influence it. It's just to offer that opportunity for an additional exposure to market, also an additional income stream. So we've got some wonderful organisations in Australia, including Australian Women in Wine, and they're very supportive and lots of knowledge, and we do seminars, and there's some really fantastic stuff that the team there are putting out. But I just wanted to have something that sort of, I guess, builds on that, brings people together, supports each other in a really positive way, but also offers an economic outcome. That's great. It's tough out there, full stop, and especially at this moment in time. And you want to be making sure that, wines are being sold and you're getting paid for them, etc. And this is just another income stream for them if they're running a winery or they're doing something anyway. Yeah.
That's so positive. That's excellent. That's really
cool. It's
the
whole concept. In the next sort of 12 months, I'm hoping to do a small scholarship for new entrants into the industry. So people who are studying, women, because that's what the whole concept of Ladygarden's about. So women entering the industry, give a bit of a leg up. And as I build, I'd like to be able to giving back to women's-based charities. I'm very passionate about things like homelessness for women. Fastest growing demographic in Australia of homelessness women is women in their 50s. And I sometimes don't like to admit that, but that's where I'm at. But I am incredibly fortunate with the life that I've had and the opportunities that I've had going forward. So I'd like to, give back. That's always been my nature.
Yeah. Oh, that's excellent. That's so good. And speaking about Women in Wine, you're about to fly off tomorrow, and we're chatting now. When by the time this comes out, you'll be back. But tell us a little bit about what you'll be doing overseas.
So it's the Women in Wine Expo. And it's in Portugal this year. I've previously been in London and in Georgia.
Is it on every year then?
Well, I believe so. It's relatively new, so I don't know as much background. And there's only two of us going from Australia, I believe, myself and Shirley Fraser from Australian Women in Wine. And they asked me to be on a panel.
Great.
So it's talking about sustainability, which I'll be honest is not, I don't have a deep knowledge of that. I have an overarching one, and I've been talking to several colleagues in the industry and sort of finding out what their thoughts are. And what Wine Australia and Wine Victoria, being from Victoria, is all about, and what Australia's doing, what some individual stories and everything. And then my sort of angle on sustainability is obviously all these things are incredibly important about the vineyard and the environment and production and what we're using bottle-wise and, green miles and all that sort of stuff and carbon footprint and everything. But one of my things, obviously, is sustainability in the industry is also in diversity and inclusion and equality.
Yeah.
So that's obviously what my business is about, but going to these things and, any opportunity to travel and meet other awesome women.
Yeah. Kelly, I was so interested when you told me that you worked in China and India. Can you tell us a bit about that experience and how you got it, but what was it like living and working in those countries?
Wow, that's like probably more than our podcast.
Okay, well, just briefly, tell us a little bit about China, because I didn't realise there was a wine region in India. I had heard about wine in China. So let's start with China. How far away from like Beijing or Shanghai is the wine region there? It's quite a long way, isn't it?
There's several wine regions.
Right.
There's not just one wine
Right,
region.
okay.
So, for example, not far from Beijing is the Shandong region in Peninsula there. They've been growing grapes in a modern context from maybe the early 90s, I would believe. Might need to...
So they're all fairly newish.
Well, yeah, but where I went initially in Yunnan province, which is in the southwest, right on the edge of the Himalayas.
Oh, right.
And the Tibetan Autonomous Region. And they had grapes growing there from the 1800s because the Jesuits...
Oh, right.
Who pop up everywhere in history.
Coming through or something, yeah.
Yeah, and they there's some very old monastery that's there, etc. In the valleys there. It's there's well-known tourist areas there, which is Lijiang and Shangri-La, or Shangri-La as we say it, but which a lot of people go to.
I was going to ask if it was a tourist destination
in
China. Yeah,
well, it is. It's a little bit off the beaten path, so it's not obviously on the east coast and Guangzhou and Guilin and those sort of places. So it is a destination. It's become more popular, and it's fascinating because Yunnan's known as the area where there is a whole lot of smaller ethnic groups. So China promote and celebrate these small ethnic groups, etc. So it's a really interesting region. And again, the winery I worked at was at 1,800 metres, and we were sometimes getting fruit from vineyards that were at 2,500 to 2,800 metres.
Particularly very cool region. Like, does it have warm summers?
It does. Well, if you think about where the latitude is,
Yeah,
it comes
right.
across from, if you're thinking about sort of northern Thailand across. So it's quite, but it is elevated, and it's very warm and humid during summer, but obviously, leading into winter, it's cold. There are mountains there. We looked across to Jade Dragon, and that had snow on it when I was there, but it sort of came and went, obviously, because I was at the tail end of summer there. It wasn't when I came, but then it was. And then you go up to Chin over the overpass at about 4,100 metres.
Wow.
And into Chin, which is at about 3,200 metres. And the mountains there, Meili Range, they're permafrost. So these mountains have permanent. So they're at 6,000 metres. So this is an incredibly spectacular, incredibly rugged area. And when we were receiving fruit, you might go, well, on the map, as the crow flies, that's only 15 kilometres, but it'll take 6 hours to get there because it would have to be picked. Some of the fruit even had to be, they picked them into baskets, had to be zip-lined across a river, then onto the trucks, and then the trucks would go and they'd all around and over a hill and over an overpass and then come around and all the rest of it. So it was a fascinating spot. And the way that region had become wine was because companies like Malt Hennessy, LVMH, and several Australian people who'd worked for them, someone like Tony Jordan, and they had worked out that would be a good region for wine because at that time the government was wanting to invest. So there already were many regions in China that were growing grapes for quite a long time, but some of the big companies that came in, like Pernod Ricard, Mott Hennessy, had really helped push and grow that. And so they've got their businesses there. And there's no open vineyards and fields like we have here. It's sort of like, I can't say ridges, like... there's these huge mountains and there's this sort of plateau. They'd gone in and the government, obviously China being a free market economy, but also a communist country, that the government had said this is what's happening. So a lot of the farmers' income was removed but replaced with growing grapes. And so they would then farm these grapes and they'd be given... out of this vineyard, the villagers would have certain ownership of the rows, but there wasn't obviously consistent farming of that because, that's how these things work and everyone's different about how they want to do it. And we found one of the things that the company I was working for, and I think the guys from Mott Hennessy, they have a winery there called Al Yun. The first year I was there, they actually made wine at the winery I was working at. So Maxence, who's the French winemaker who'd come there, I believe still there. So he's been there since 2012, I think. Wow. So really, that's an amazing effort to go and live in a country like that for. So we, when it worked the best was when the company would lease the whole vineyard. They pay for the grapes as well, but then they would employ the farmers to work back as well. So, and then you had more control over how the vineyard was farmed and the grapes were looked after, etc. Because, these people, this is absolutely their hand-to-mouth livelihood, and a village up the road would be picking, and down the road's like, because as soon as they got picked, they got paid. So down the road, they're like, hi, they're picking, we want to get paid too, so they'd want to pick. But of course, when you're trying to make the premium wines, so the best way to do that was to lease the vineyards, and then they got money for leasing. They also got employed back. Some of the challenges there were peak growing season was incredibly humid. So disease management. Also the cover crops that people were growing. You'd walk down a row and they'd be full of vegetables. Saw some other interesting things being grown there, but we won't discuss that on a podcast.
That's all right. What are the main grape varieties? Are they ones
Cabernet is very much the big thing, because
they
have
ripen there.
Well, yeah, and they again, it's the Chinese culture is they're very about the prestige, etc., and they see Bordeaux as being the epitome of and I know Cabernet is not flavour of the month, hasn't been for a long time, but it's one of my favourite varieties.
Good Cabernet is,
it is, because I've had the opportunity to make it all around the world, except France, would you believe? Yeah. So maybe one day I'll go to Bordeaux. It's predominantly that. There was quite a few other interesting varieties that we saw there that I hadn't seen elsewhere. Vidal, I think, was the white variety. Yeah, so that was an amazing experience, and it came about essentially. I'd gone from one production winemaking role in a huge commercial winery to another production role in a smaller winery, more boutique, local here in Geelong, and I just felt that I wasn't making wine anymore. And vintage time came around, and I'd offered to sort of help down there because I was a salaried employee, and that didn't quite pan out. And I felt, I'm not making wine anymore. And I remember going down there and smelling the barrel room, and I thought, Anyway, I saw this advertisement through Wine Network Consulting and Gary Baldwin, and I applied, and he rang up and said, "You got a job?" And I said, "Yeah, I'm not making wine anymore. I've lost my passion, love travel, very adaptable to, love a challenge, all the rest of it." And anyway, he rang me up and said, "All right, kiddo, I'm going to put you up for this. You sure you're up for it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And anyway, I got the job. And I'm on the plane, and Gary's come with me because he's the senior consultant, has been working in China, or had been at that stage for, I don't know, at least 20 years.
So you knew the culture.
And he's up the pointy end of the plane, and I'm up the back, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what have I done? And I've burst into tears, and I thought, don't be ridiculous, you've made wine. The best thing about those opportunities is essentially it's a finite thing. When you're going into an unknown situation, or you're unhappy in something, if you can't see, and when you know that there's the light at the end of the tunnel, this is when the contract ends, it'll be vintage, you just go in and you do it. Yeah. And I felt it was quite an interesting experience, because I never quite got what my brief was until probably about halfway through. And then I went, okay, cool. So, I was essentially there to see what's going on. It was a long way from the big cities, and they wanted someone to really sort of suss out what was going on and work out what the opportunities were to be had there. So there are great opportunities. If you look what Moet Hennessy have done with Al Yun and Maxence making those wines, they started when I was there, 2013 was their first vintage, and then they had their winery set up there. I had the privilege to be invited as a guest to Archive Wine Bar with Graham. He's in local wine bar in Geelong. Amazing wine list. He's got 150 wines by the glass.
Archive Wine Bar. Okay, if you come to Geelong, check that out. Yep.
Absolutely. So Graham Sutherland owns that. It's a good friend of mine. He has over 150 wines by the glass because he has it under Coravin, and amazing. You can go in there and have Grand Cru, Burgundies, First Growth, Bordeaux's, etc. So amazing. And he had a Cabernet thing and said, "Would you like to come? I'm going to show Al Yun." And I'm like, "Oh, fantastic. I haven't seen it since I was there."
Wow.
And he had a later vintage, obviously. Sells around the world for $600, $700, $800 or something a bottle.
Wow.
Yeah, ask me if any wine's worth that. Yeah, but I understand the business and the marketing of it and all the rest of it. So really
so
smart
that's like
wines.
Chinese premium wine.
Absolutely. Because we don't see a lot of wine out of China,
don't.
because essentially it's feeding their domestic market.
Right.
And they have had a lot of Western influence, especially if you're a bloke and you're from Bordeaux, they open the door to you.
So over there, because I was there in 2011, just in Beijing, and did the Trans-Mongolian, and remember stopping at the border and having the Great Wall Chinese red wine, which was not that wonderful at the time. But is the market primarily to cater to the masses, or is it all about premium wines? Is it to cater to the high end?
Well, it's across the board, really. When I got there in 2013, one of the big conversations was having that the China wine industry was taking a big hit because there'd been a huge crackdown on the gifting. So obviously a lot of gifting was done of premium products, and of course with a lot of things in China, it's all about how it looks. So this beautiful packaging and boxes and all the rest of it, and amazing heavy bottles and that sort of thing. So there was a huge crackdown on, gifting of things. So, and wine became one of those things. So, and there's 1.3 billion people, and if you think about that as a percentage of the market that was premium or is emerging growing middle class that want to emulate Western life and having glasses of wine when they go out for dinners and that sort of thing. So it's a very interesting, I haven't been involved, that's 11 years ago, so I know things change, and especially, and there are some great wines that come out of there, because from that experience, if I may jump to the Ningxia, in 2015, when I had a bit of spare time, I was still coming backwards and forwards from India, the Ningxia wine region, which is sort of in the middle north on the edge of the Inner Mongolia, next province across from Shaanxi, where Xi'an is the terracotta warriors.
Right.
So to put that there, so it's the next province west from there. Huge big city, Yinchuan, population of around 1 million, but huge wine industry there.
Right.
So Pernod Ricard were the company that went in there, and Chandon are in there too.
Gosh.
And so they've gone in and created,
and is this still Cabernet? Or is this different?
Cabernet, again. And so what they did, they got together and they thought, what can we do to help promote Ningxia region? And they put a competition together where they invited winemakers from all around the world to come to Ningxia for vintage. We then were randomly allocated a winery to work with. I ended up with the only other person from Geelong, and we all got allocated a winery partner with, and a block of Cabernet, and we got to make that Cabernet for vintage. Wow. And then over the next 2 years, we were flown in and out. So this is a huge expense that they've come to fly people from all around the world to come back a couple of times each year to check on the wines to make sure everything's happening. And it was an incredibly levelling experience because, of course, people from the West are going, it's not fair, I haven't got any oak, or it's not fair, I got this block. And understood that it really was. You were randomly. I got allocated to the winery of the local local university's Professor Wong, his winery, and all the students there. But fortunately, he was partnered with another winery where they were building this massive chateau and winery where there was very little expense spared. The guy who owned that was the key owner of one of China's biggest white goods companies. So we were fortunate when we said, can we get some oak? We managed to get hold of Sega Moreau and we got some really good oak.
So do they use French oak, or do they have Chinese oak?
No, it's all, well, we all used French oak because that's what we knew. And this competition was really interesting. So not only was it an amazing opportunity, and I'd already had the chance to be in China, so I kind of knew how the system worked, whereas a lot of people really struggled because they didn't get it and didn't feel in control of what they were able to do, and etc. So it kind of wasn't a level playing field when it came to this, but it was a bit contentious at times because essentially there was quite good prize money. So if you got a gold medal, I got a silver, and I think it was like $5,000 or maybe it was more than that. We also got to keep half of it, and I managed to sell mine, which was really good. So I got some money out of it, which is great. The gold medal, I think it was like $10,000. It was a lot of money, and I think there were.
So the competition sounds like it went for a really long time.
So it went for 2 years. So we did the original vintage, and then you could come back, and then they had a huge big. We came back to bottle, and then we came back. Essentially 2 years later at the vintage time, we all met in Yinchuan in Ningxia, and then we went to Beijing and had the big awards ceremony.
Blind tasting?
It was all done, and it was all very transparent with the judging. They had some international, some local judges, and they had this big roadshow. So we all go to Beijing, and they have the big awards ceremony, and it's really terrific. And then our flight was booked at 6 o'clock in the morning. So of course we, in true form of, a bunch of international winemakers, went, well, we're not going to bed.
No, stay up all night,
So that was, I don't know, these poor people that had to manage 48 international winemakers. When we all arrived in Ningxia in 2015, there was a young guy, Matthias from Austria, and he worked out that the Kempinski Hotel he's going, because that's a German owned, he's going, oh, Oktoberfest. And so 48 international winemakers on the first night we're all there have joined up to Oktoberfest. Was not a pretty next day.
Gosh.
I think they might have regretted having that.
That's hilarious.
So we came back, had that big, and then we got divided into groups, and we went to Shanghai, Nanjing, I think, and we went to Fujian, I think it is, right down on the south. So it was a really big expenditure that they've done to promote and build, the Ningxia wine region. And again, really great wines turning out of there, but how are they going to be exported? Probably not. That's going to be predominantly domestic.
And then you went to India.
Yeah.
So I didn't know there was wine in India. Like that blew my mind. So what did you grow there, or where's the wine region?
So, well, there's several.
Yes.
And
That's right. Yeah,
so
it's a big country.
When
yes.
I did my studies in winemaking in 2005, 2006 at Adelaide Uni, I did postgraduate studies there. There were two guys from India, and I'd always had in the back of my head, oh, that'd be really cool, go and work in India. So when I was finishing up in Yunnan province, Gary Baldwin rings me and goes, how's it going, kiddo? So he goes, hey, listen, we've got this job that's coming up in India. And I went, I'm in. And he goes, oh, hang on a second. I said, no, I'm in. He goes, let's get through. I'm in. So essentially I finished up my work in China. I met a friend in Hong Kong. We did a bit of a tour around for 20 days or so and had a wonderful sort of touristy experience and wind down from vintage. Came back, got off the plane. Mark O'Callaghan, who works for Wine Network, picked me up. I've never met him. He was sort of going to be the overseeing person in India. He's in the car. We're trying to finalise it all, etc. I get home and it's all done. And 5 days later, I'm on a plane going to India. So where I went to is kind of a standalone site. There are other vineyards around, but for table grapes, but not much at all. And the owners, Uma and Krishna Chigurapati, have this property and they've subsequently built on that. They own a pharmaceutical manufacturing company that's done extremely well, that they've built up, and it's always been Krishna's passion to make wine. And he's bought this vineyard, and Uma is very passionate about the vineyard, and she's now really sort of the face of and so forth of its Kruzma Estates. So that's in Karnataka, and if you kind of draw a triangle between Hyderabad, Goa and Bangalore, it's smack in the middle. There's about 80 kilometres from Hampi, which is a quite a well-known sort of tourist destination. Mm-hmm. So in the middle of nowhere, not a tourist area whatsoever. Funnily enough, the lady that was in the Ningxia Winemakers Challenge that I met, Jen, was the previous winemaker to me. So as soon as I got to Ningxia, we were like, blah, 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 all talking about India. So that was amazing. So what
grapes do they
they've, again...
Cabernet.
Yeah, and that's predominantly not so much the French thing that Krishna is absolutely enamoured with, California Cabernet.
Oh, right.
Or, Napa Cabernet, really.
And is it a big red like the Californian ones?
I think diplomatically is what they kind of wanted to do, but Mark very much, and then subsequently, I guess myself sort of guiding them is that we can look at that, but you have a unique site and embrace that. And even... it was to do with some of the clones, but even just the site there. And that was probably the first time that I had so much involvement in the vineyard. They were planting Shiraz there, but I wasn't there when that came. We had Sangiovese. So first time I ever had the opportunity to make Sangiovese in my career. Where did I make it?
In India. Wow. So what was the climate like there?
It's
humid as well?
Yeah. So essentially it's the growing picking season's winter. So it is shorter days, lovely and warm, but very cool at night. And I got there and I'm looking at the numbers thinking, oh my God, we're going to be picking next week. But not realising that it's so cool at night and the short days meant that even though those numbers, if you had those numbers here in Australia, literally you'd be 5 days later,
the
bone
things,
so and your acids and everything, and just tasting it, like, oh, we're nearly there, and it would be 4 weeks before we, some of the ones, because that was the first time that I was doing this, so I understood that. What happens in this particular area, and I believe in quite a few others, is in India, is that the vines, when you've picked, only go into dormancy for like a week, couple of weeks, if that, and they prune them. So essentially they could do a second growing season, but 2 reasons you don't want to do that. Number one is if you're putting a lot of stress on the vines, so you want to maximise their ability to produce the best fruit that they can. If you're doing 2 or 3 vintages, some places in Southeast Asia are doing 3. But 2. And the second reason is that second growing season is when monsoon comes through, does a bit of a thing up north, and then comes back again. And so huge issues with disease management, not pest control, but disease management, so powdery downy, mildew, botrytis, etc. So that was absolutely, I came home for 5 days, whirlwind, see everyone I haven't seen for 5 months or 4 months, nearly 5 months, on a plane, and I'm off to India.
Wow.
And it was after about 2 days of realising that if I just didn't let go and just embrace the experience, I was going to have a horrible time. Learning that India stretchable time is India stretchable time, and yes, madam means yes, maybe in half an hour, maybe in 2 hours, maybe tomorrow.
Right.
And as soon as I let that go, it's
a culture shift, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it is. And I've done a lot of travel, and I'm very open.
But working in that it would take a bit to get used to, like,
absolutely,
a different way of doing things.
Yeah, and learning little tricks to say that's okay, we'll do that next year, and because something was too hard to get, or something it would turn up.
So how many vintages did you do there?
So 2, and I was going back for the 3rd. Then the opportunity came here to stay in Geelong, and I loved it, but I felt that I was losing a bit of connections and stuff back here. I've got an amazing friend group and everything, but it is challenging.
People can visit like that winery.
But it's way out of the way, kind of anything. But Nasik's the mate. That's just east of Mumbai. Pune is the city. There's wineries near Goa. There's wineries or vineyards and wineries down in Bangalore, in greater Bangalore region, and there's quite a few popping up in northern India, on the edge of the Himalayas.
Wow! So if you go to India, that you can put all those in your itinerary. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, and there's some really there are some really great wines being turned out of India. And
do they keep them for the local market?
It is the local market. I think a bit goes to the US. Krishna had always, their business is heavily involved in the US, their pharmaceutical business, and he'd always wanted to make the best wine in India, and we did. So between Jen, me, and the subsequent winemakers have been turning out some really top-notch wines, and people going, oh yeah, best wine in India, so what? It's like, yeah, well, one of my wines also won a gold at the International Conquest of Cabernet, up against a whole lot of internationals.
Congratulations.
So really proud moment, and I think once... To go back to what we were talking about before, and Krishna sort of going, well, I want to make, his goal was to be like California. Whereas we were saying you should embrace what the vineyard is. And I think the first year I probably embraced this beautiful aromatics that you got from the vineyard and didn't give it enough body and texture underneath. But the second year I got that really, and that was the wines that had done really well. And they were crackers. And that was, I think... It all comes to, like I said before, it all comes down to wines made in the vineyard, and you embrace your terroir.
Yes.
Don't try to, this is what your vineyard produces. Let's make the best of what we can do there without trying to emulate something else by throwing a whole lot of oak or a whole lot of tannins or a whole lot of this. Embrace that, and they've done exceptionally well. And they're doing really well in the US, I believe, too.
Can I just loop you just on you were saying there to Ladygarden, because you... you buy grapes from different places. So does that depend on the winemaker that you're working with to where the grapes come from, or you?
Yeah. So essentially, when I've gone to, hey, Erin, would you like to be part of this project I'm doing, which has now turned into a business, and she said, yeah, and I said, you find something you'd like to work with, and that's from your region. I'm buying grapes here, make the wine. So it's about you and what you want to do. The whole concept too is that it's not just restricted to my actual brand, Ladygarden. Happy to do collaborations as well. So, I don't want to have 20 wines in the Ladygarden. I'd like to keep that each year and rotate through and do different varieties and do different and interesting things and increase the volumes of those. But then this adjunct to that was been doing collaborations. Excellent. And we can create a new label that's a joint thing between the two people.
And so we can go to your website to buy your wines. Where else can we?
Yep, absolutely. ladygardenwines.com.au. And I'll give your listeners a special code. If we put Winederlust in there, I'll put a code in for that.
That sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Kelly, for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.
Meet you.
Yeah.
For everything discussed today,